It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and this is the Bob Leonard Show. As we tell you every week, we'll be talking about the stories you've been reading about in your newspaper and watching on television this week, and we put our spin on it. We try to give you the story behind the story. And we'll be with you for, as I said, about an hour, and you may agree or you may disagree. But, obviously we're going to have our say. It's only our opinion, so keep that in mind, too. And if you miss this program tonight, it'll be on tomorrow night at 11 to 12. It's a repeat of this program. And if you miss it then and you want to see it on the internet, it is broadcast on a continuous basis on flinttalk.com. Just put in flinttalk.com and the program will come up. So those of you who miss it have a lot of opportunity to see it if you want to. Tonight we want to talk about some strange things going on in the Flint Board of Education, the school system. And the question you have to ask is, Superintendent Walter Milton in line for another job in another district? Or is this too good to be true? Then we want to talk about the policy of the County Board of Commissioners and how they intend to distribute the new $80 million senior citizens millage. It was just approved by the voters in last August election. It seems to me that this money is being geared, as it sets now in my mind, not to fully take care of the seniors' needs, but some of it to fatten local government's general funds with the use of the senior millage. They're using some imaginative bookkeeping practices to accomplish this. We'll examine this, in my opinion, this possible sellout by some of these commissioners tonight. You have to ask yourself, there was an interesting story on television this week. Channel 12 was the only one that carried it. I thought it was a pretty good story because you have to ask yourself, what in the world is going on in the Goodridge School District when officials there would countenance permit a male school administrator to sit in on an all-girls sex education class, and all attending make inappropriate and unwelcome sounds which were interpreted as sexual in nature by many of the female attendees. And then the principal takes a position, it wasn't that bad, or at least some of it wasn't that bad. If I was a parent and had a daughter in that school, and this was happening, where this fellow was making certain sounds which were completely inappropriate under the circumstances, or why is that guy in that class, whatever the case would be, I would be very upset, and I don't blame those parents for being upset when they heard about this situation. But anyway, finally, some new developments have come up in the city of Burton's public corruption case, where you might remember Department of Public Works Director Charles Robert was convicted of bribery and extortion by a federal jury a couple of weeks ago. And Burton Mayor Charles Smiley was accused of wrongdoing in that trial. We want to try to put them in a little better perspective tonight because there's a couple of things have happened which update it. But anyway, let's go on here. Just yesterday, Channel 12 did a story that the Flint School Superintendent, Walter Milton, had applied for and is being considered for a position of school superintendent for the Springfield, Illinois School District. Here's the report. Can you play that, please?
To provide a much-needed change in the district. However, since he's arrived, he's been embroiled in controversy. ABC 12's Matt Franklin reports.
The Flint community was first introduced to Walter Milton in August 2005. Many on the school board believe Milton was the man who could bring innovative ideas to the district.
We have to really hold on to is having a school system that's really going to be dedicated to addressing the issues that children have.
A tall task for a district that has been hammered by declining enrollment and fewer dollars from the state. Milton also faced personal challenges himself. He apologized after reports surfaced questioning his educational background. Then it was back to shaking things up in the district.
We're going to require that we give them a strong, rigorous academic instructional process so that they can move forward.
In 2006, he introduced a reform plan that was designed to create an intense academic environment for students. The nationally recognized plan consolidated classes in closed buildings, at the same time causing confusion, turmoil, and in some cases classroom overcrowding. But still, controversy followed Milton. He fought allegations from his previous district in New York of financial mismanagement. Then in September, his business partner and district employee Julius Anthony resigned after a background check found in 1996 he was charged with molesting a 3-year-old Georgia boy. Anthony pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, and this year a judge set aside the conviction. Milton says he didn't know about Anthony's past. Milton has been working with a partially divided board to execute several job cuts to help get the district out of an $8 million deficit. And with so much work still needed to be done, some wonder who will lead the district if he decides to leave. Matt Franklin, ABC 12 News.
Now, to put this story in perspective in our criticism of the Flint School Board and the hiring of Mr. Milton, it seems to me that when this started, and I might mention to you parenthetically that when it started, when they brought him in here and his credentials proved to be phony, and he blamed that on his wife's preparation of it, and his statement he didn't realize that she had made the mistake, said he had a PhD when he didn't have one. We said at that time, we thought he was new, he was coming in here, we ought to give him a chance to see if he can do what he says he can do. And we ought to just forgive him about this lack of candor on his application, and let's see what he can do. Give him a chance to do the job. So when we started on this program talking about him, we were trying to help him. We were supporting him. But now, frankly, I think the best thing that could happen in Flint is if Milton was gone. All of this stuff that you saw on Channel 12, he lacks credibility. And most people in the community, and almost all the teachers, have no confidence in his ability to move Flint into the future. This latest move to leave Flint is a clear indication of his lack of commitment to the Flint schools and to their students. Now, here's the Journal article that was in yesterday. Milton seeks job in Illinois. School chief is finalist for Springfield superintendent. It says, among other things, Milton, whose tenure in Flint has been marked by controversy over his reform plan, the district's deficit rose, And an administrator who subsequently resigned said Sunday that he felt personally attacked during the time in Flint. It's like I've been made to be a character I don't even know. But, you know, whose fault is that? You know, this baggage Milton carries is of his own making. And, for example, you know, we talked about he lied on his credentials when he first came in here, saying he had a PhD, which he didn't have. Now, he has since gotten it, as I understand, but he didn't have it then. Why would he put it in there? And then he, after being here and being warned numerous times, he violated state law by refusing to be fingerprinted until forced to do so by the action of the teachers union. They FOI'd his record in his history, and he hadn't gotten it. He had received numerous emails from administrators in the Flint system telling him he had to get fingerprint. He ignored it. I think I know why, but, you know, it's only my opinion, and I'll discuss that in a moment. So, you know, this is a violation of state law. The law requires before you hire an employee in a school district, they must be fingerprinted and their records checked. This was not done for Milton and Anthony, his buddy, his partner. And I think they didn't do it for, Milton didn't do it because they were the only two people left in the school district that weren't fingerprinted. And if they fingerprinted Milton and he gave in, they would have to fingerprint Anthony, would have found out about his record. No. I'm very suspicious about him ignoring the demand that he be fingerprinted by the Flint school system. And the fact that if Anthony was fingerprinted after he hired him, it would disclose the sexual assault on a 3-year-old child. Well, anyway, you have that situation. He failed to get fingerprinted. Then he fails to provide school supplies and books for all the children in the district, the most basic thing you can do. You're teaching children, you have to have supplies and you have to have books. Many of the schools, the teachers, don't have them yet today, even though this was made available in the news media. The knowledge of it was made available in the news media 3, 4, 5 months ago. It still hasn't been corrected. And then, you know, here this reorganization plan. It's a disaster. It started the school year overcrowded classrooms. 50, 55, 60 students in a classroom. I mean, you're supposed to have, you know, like 30, 31 at the maximum. It's better to have in the low 20s for teaching purposes. Now, this is just poor planning. Couldn't you figure out how many students are going to be there? Now, granted, there are some that are leaving the district and you don't know until the first day of school. But this continued on. For example, in Southwestern disaster, they had to reopen McKinley School to reassign the 8th graders they had originally signed to Southwestern. But they couldn't fit them in. They were overcrowded. You're talking about, you know, hundreds of students. That should have been projected. That's just poor planning again. Then you have the multi-million-dollar, $5, $6 million deficit during his tenure. I mean, you can hold the previous superintendents to some of this responsibility, but he was here during other parts of it. Poor management, like in New York. Channel 12, in checking out his background in New York, found out he was criticized for mismanagement there, and then we've got him here. And then there was, the story of the illegal chemicals, mercury, found at Northern High School. 3 years after those schools were supposed to be checked pursuant to state law, and they weren't. When he came in here, the first thing you should do is read the laws in Michigan that fix responsibility on the superintendent, the school district, the school board, on what they're supposed to do. He obviously didn't do that. And there's no evidence yet today that even after the mercury was found at Northern High School, and obviously it had been overlooked and the state statute hadn't been followed, there's no indication that that's been corrected. Have the schools been checked? They just blow it off like it's nothing. And then he hires a pedophile as the second in command of our school district. His friend. Now, this all could have been checked out originally, as I say, if fingerprints were taken as required by law of Milton and of Anthony. Could it be that Milton didn't want his fingerprints taken because then Anthony's would have, and the cat would have been out of the bag? We would have found out about Anthony's record, and he then couldn't hire his good friend? I don't know. But it was done very shabbily. Now we have this problem of a $4 million book account shortage. What's that all about? Spending above what the budget called for without getting approval of the Board of Education, which is required by the rules and regulations of the state law. Again, we have violations of state law. We have violations of policy. And we're now $4 million in debt. And who got us there? Mr. Anthony. This case, this situation, deserves a criminal investigation by the prosecutor. Was there payoffs here to get these additional books? Where are the books? They're short of books. Where did the money go? I mean, there's a lot of questions here. And all these things are happening on his watch. You know, despite these glaring deficiencies, this school board, if you can believe this, gave him glowing assessments of the job he's doing. Of course, the school board failed in their responsibility by not checking out Milton's deficiency before hiring him. They could have done it. Yeah, his credentials, his financial problems in the district, previous district, his relationship with Anthony, who Anthony was before they hired him. All that could have been checked out if they followed the rules and the state law. They didn't do that. The board didn't do it. The administration didn't do it. You know, this is why the community needs a clean sweep in the upcoming school board election. You know, there's a lot of options. I don't know, 25, 30 people running for the 8 or 9 spots. We need a change here. Now, we have Mr. Cleves, who was on the Board of Education, who was chairman of the subcommittee that went to New York to check Milton out, making comments, if you can believe this, about Milton's treatment in light of all these deficiencies. Can you play that tape, please?
We talked with one of Dr. Milton's closest allies on the school board for his reaction today. Herb Cleve says he doesn't feel betrayed, and if Milton leaves, he would hate to see him go.
I think the man probably just felt he had enough, and he's got a young family, and I just think I don't think he wants to raise his kids in this kind of environment.
Are you upset by this?
I am upset at the mood of some of the people in this community that attacked him.
Given the controversy right after he started with his resume, do you regret, knowing what you know now, hiring him?
No, we do not, because if we regretted hiring him, we would have gotten rid of him.
Do you think he got a bum rap through all this?
Of course he did. Some individuals can only take so much pressure from the community and the media. He was pounced upon. There were various groups in the community who wanted him out.
Where do you go from here? Let's say he gets this job in Springfield, Illinois. You've got this big changes going on in the Flint schools. Certainly they need change. How do you move forward from here?
Joel, we're going to have to move forward. We don't have any other choice. This community has got to come together and talk about what it wants in terms of education and not continue to meet behind closed doors with little factions and groups.
According to an Illinois newspaper, Dr. Milton will visit Springfield on Thursday, and a decision on the job could be made that night.
Well, I can understand why Herb Cleves is supporting Milton. He was the one that really brought him here. And he'd have to acknowledge that he made this mistake, and I've known Herb for a lot of years. He's a friend of mine. Now, he and I disagree very much on this issue of Milton, and he'll probably be angry with my observations here in regard to his involvement in it, but, the facts are the facts. Listen to what the Journal said about when he originally, it says, Milton said he and his wife Lisa recently decided he would apply for the Springfield Post and also discuss returning to New York State. We have 3 children, and we're talking about how important it is to be close to our families, Milton said. Springfield's not far from my wife's family. I don't know what that means. If he's talking about New York, Michigan is closer. And then he comes up with this wide-reaching reform plan in March 2002, the Journal mentions here. He said, they were closing schools, adopting new curriculum, opening a classical academy and gender-based academies. Some of those things probably weren't bad, but some parents, here's what some parents and other criticize: the overcrowded classrooms, the scarcity of textbooks, and the sudden mid-year move of students that resulted. He's talking about the McKinley Southwestern, I'm sure. I'm shocked, says Jane Glenn, whose grandson, Trev Glenn, 14, attends Flint Central Academy. He created all the turmoil, she said, and now who's left to deal with all these kids and problems he's caused? Glenn said her grandson is among the students who attend class in the school's cramped basement, which she described as a breeding ground for tension and violence. She says, this is a quote, the school board's not paying attention. They don't even know about all the times the police have been called to the school this year. It's probably a good thing if Milton does leave, because they hired someone who didn't know much about Flint, came in wanting to make all sorts of changes, and it's not working. Now, you heard Cleves, and you heard Milton say that he's disturbed by the heat he's taken. And, you know, there's an old saying, Harry Truman used to have a saying when he was president. You know, the buck stops here, and that's where it stops with Milton. It stops at his desk. And he also had this statement that I think is appropriate here. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. What do you expect coming to Flint, Michigan, where the dropout rate is 65% and growing, violence in the schools, reducing the student bodies, people flying out of the city, going to charter schools? Did he think it would be a cakewalk? Now, you know, we have Cleves' comments, typical of a person who was at least partially responsible for creating the debacle. He was chairman, as I say, of the committee that brought Milton here. I think he did a poor job. And I think the school board did a poor job by not checking these people out, or saying to Cleves, did you check him out? Did you check his credentials? Did you check his history? What's going on with that school district? What problems did he have there? You know, if they did, they really let down the people of Flint. If they didn't, it's just as bad. Now, we have Cleves and his people on the school blaming the press and the concerned citizens for their skepticism and pointing out Milton's and the school board's failures. Hey, we didn't create those things. We're commenting on them. But it's typical, you know, you want to kill the messenger. You know, in my mind, our kids deserve better than a stopover, subsidized administrator. Now we're still paying this guy his salary. And get rid of him. You know, actually, after hearing this and knowing his background, if the Springfield district checks him out, it's hard for me to believe that they would hire Milton with this background. I just can't believe they're going to hire him. I think we're going to be stuck with him, continue to be stuck with him. If we are, you know, he should go. He doesn't want to be here. Why do we want a person here like that? Our kids deserve better. You know, he either wants to get another job or he wants to go back and live by his family. You know, he had to be thinking of that when he came out here, and he came here, and if he knew it was just going to be a stopover, he came here under false pretenses. You know, you almost have to wonder whether or not some of this is kind of a ploy, and whether that job in Springfield is really viable, or is this another attempt to try to generate some sympathy for Milton so people will get off his back. You can't get off a guy's back like this who makes this many mistakes. Like I said, our kids deserve better. We ought to, when the new school board is elected in May, then the first job should be, if he's still here, is to get rid of him, because we're just paying a person who is here temporarily. What commitment does a person like that have to the district when he's out looking for other jobs? Well, anyway, we'll see what happens. They're supposed to make a decision Thursday or Friday. We would be so lucky. Let's go on to the next subject. Every time the Genesee County Commission comes up with new rules of obtaining funding from the senior citizens millage for senior citizens program, it kind of confirms what we said last August, or actually last spring, before the $80 million senior millage was put on the ballot. We said then this program would be a disaster because there was no rules and regulations on how the money would be distributed and to whom. Unfortunately, I think our prediction may be coming true. All the talk so far has been about using much of the millage money to fund senior citizen centers. They only accommodate about 10% of the senior population, if that many. Little is known what the other 90% of seniors need, how they're going to be serviced. This is ridiculous. It's like a fund, a revolving fund that these senior citizen centers think that we owe them. They do a lot of good things, but there are other people that need the help. The county commission really kind of started out well about 3 months ago when they came up with a plan. In order to guarantee the senior citizen millage would be used only for senior citizen program, the commission came up with the reasonable rule that each local government that had been funding a senior citizen center, there was about 16 of them, must continue to fund at 100% of the previous year funding. That sounded reasonable, because if they did that, the $150,000 the commission was going to give each of these 16 centers from the senior millage would be additional money that could be used for new senior citizen program that would provide those seniors not able to use the centers with services such as Meals on Wheels, health care, transportation, and other services not now readily available to them. If they didn't, they were going to lose $150,000. Of course, this rule immediately ran into political opposition from the local government providing the centers, who anticipated the new funding from the senior citizen, when it was given to them, would be without strings attached. They could use it for anything. Well, that would be great. You trust your elected officials in those local governments to take care of the seniors with this money, or would they use it for other things? As we predicted 2 weeks ago, immediately after this criticism came in, the county commission caved in and cut the 100% requirement to 50%. And they really did it so they wouldn't aggravate the township and city officials who they need on their side to get reelected in the next election. So the seniors are now used as political pawns. Of course, What these local officials really wanted here was the windfall of the 50% cut in their contribution to the center's expenses. They would put it back into the general fund for city and township purposes. You know, here's what's happened here. The bottom line really here is a large portion of the senior citizen millage will be going to local government's general fund, not to the senior citizen program. Not 100%, 50% now required. Therefore, this 50% will be taken back by the cities and the townships, put in their general fund. You know, this turn of events should outrage every citizen that voted for the senior citizen millage for senior programs. You know, the millage should never have been put in or put on the ballot until rules and regulations had been laid out, as we suggested back in the spring before it was on the ballot. So when people voted on the proposal, you could put what the money is going to be used for so that they could see what the millage was going for. You know, in this case, some of the millage in reality is being pilfered to feather the local government's own nest, also known as the general fund, for which salaries and raises and you know, are paid from the general fund, or expenses for conferences for public employees come from the to be used for trips to exotic locations for conferences, come from the general fund. Plush new offices, renovations, comes out of the general fund. And, you know, the senior citizen money shouldn't be paid either directly or indirectly for this, and it's being paid indirectly because they're cutting their contribution, their original contribution to local government by 50% at least. So the senior citizen money has to be used to make that up. Fewer programs as a result for senior citizens because they have to make up the shortage caused by the 50% withdrawal by the local government. Yeah, so really what you're having here is the county commission and the local governments are siphoning off large sums of the seniors' millage for purposes never intended. Now, the newest wrinkle to get some of the senior millage emerged when it was reported in the Flint Journal by our good friend Ron Fogger this week. It was in Sunday's paper. And it says, county may help guard seniors. Tax could create protective posts. And what Ron is talking about here, and keep in mind, he's the only source to find out what's really going on this millage because he covers the county building and you learn what's going on from that. And that's why you read so many stories about him and you hear about what he's covering down there because he's the only one covering it. The television people rarely go down there. You know, now, what these probate judges have done, it's Bob Weiss and Jenny Barkey, they've asked the County Senior Citizen Advisory Committee to consider their proposal for a county office of public guardian. This committee makes recommendations to the county commission on how the millage, the senior citizens millage, should be spent. Now, according to the founder, the office would help handle guardianship and conservatorships for people over 60 years old who can't manage their own affairs. And it's a good story. If you have a chance, if you still have some of these papers, you ought to look at it if you haven't already looked at it. Now, this concern came up about this problem with the arrest of Attorney Shannon Pitcher and another fellow, another attorney, for embezzling near $1 million from vulnerable adults. Many of them senior citizens who couldn't take care of themselves, or because they're handicapped, or because of their age. The judges say they have 1,900 open files and need guardians or conservators right now for them. But instantly, a guardian makes decisions for another person who can't take care of his or her self because of disability, age, or incapacity. A conservator is limited to managing a person's money because of the person's disability, age, or incapacity. The two of them kind of run together. Some people are appointed to do both jobs for an individual, rather than have two people that are dealing with the same individual. It would seem to me such a use of the senior citizen millage is just the type of program the voters intended the millage to be used for. You know, while checkers and pinochle are good programs for senior socializing, and I don't knock that. I think that's good that they have these programs at senior citizens. The need to help these needy citizens who need guardians and conservators, who suffer with these handicaps and incapacities, must take a higher priority for the use of the senior millage money. So we have no more of the Shannon Pitcher debacles. You know, such a public office would have personnel to make sure questions about guardians and conservators are regulated, requiring reporting so as to make certain there is no further irregularities like this in this Pitcher case. We hope they give the judge's request some serious consideration. Let me quickly go here. I just want to revisit tonight the allegations of corruption made by the U.S. Attorney Robert Havlin against the Burton Mayor Charles Smiley and the Public Works Director Charles Abbey. There's a few more wrinkles that have developed here that we want to talk about. But to familiarize and to acclimate some of the people who are watching tonight who may not have seen last week's program, I want to quickly just go back over that to bring them up to date. Could you play that first tape about Abbey's conviction in the federal court?
Breaking news, a Burton City official has been found guilty on all 3 federal charges: conspiracy, bribery, and extortion. Good evening, I'm Bill Harris.
And I'm Angie Hendershot. After a week and a half in the courtroom, a jury has just found Charles Abbey guilty of trading political favors for a free lot from a Burton developer. Karen Asher has been following the story since the investigation started 3 years ago. She joins us now live from U.S. District Court in Flint. Karen? Angie, Charles Abbey and his family and friends who have packed this federal courthouse every single day since the trial began erupted into tears when that guilty verdict was read. This trial wraps up an investigation, as you said, that goes back to 2003 and testimony from the U.S. Attorney's key witness, Blake Rizzo. Blake Rizzo, the Burton developer, claimed he bribed Charles Abbey with a free lot in his subdivision in exchange for political favors. Through testimony, the government showed how Abbey used his position as city administrator to obtain the lot. In exchange, Abbey helped Rizzo receive favorable treatment on his upcoming building projects like Pebble Creek. The prosecution showed Rizzo received a total of $324,000 from the city of Burton for managing his own subdivision, something the prosecution claimed Abbey made happen. The defense called witnesses that testified Abbey never influenced anyone. They also called multiple witnesses to show Rizzo never wanted a lot he gave Abbey that was surrounded by power lines. But it wasn't enough to convince this jury. After 8 hours of deliberations, they found him guilty. The family of Charles Abbey is outraged. He was found guilty on all 3 counts.
I hope these jurors can sleep at night knowing that they put an innocent man behind bars. Because we know that Mr. Rizzo lied about everything and that Charles was innocent. We know that. That's all I can say. It's just, you know what, it's just bad that that kind of criminal could get out, and my husband didn't do a thing wrong. It's just, it's terrible. I don't know how this justice system even works.
The family is referring to the fact that back in 2003, Blake Rizzo, as we mentioned, the government's key witness, made a deal with the Genesee County prosecutor at the time, Ed Bush. Now, Rizzo, who was facing 4 felonies for crimes he committed, only had to plead to 2 misdemeanors if he provided Prosecutor Bush with evidence and testimony against several Genesee County officials. Rizzo claimed he paid off for political favors. Obviously, you can see from that video, the family is very emotional. We did see Charles Abbey right after, but because we can't bring our cameras into the courtroom, we couldn't question him. We were told he slipped out the back door. But his family tells us he is very upset, disappointed about the verdict. He is out on bond until he is sentenced. Again, Charles Abbey, he was found guilty on conspiracy, bribery, and extortion charges. That is the latest from downtown Flint. I'm Karen Asher for ABC 12 News. Back.
You know, like I said last week, this report by Ms. Asher sounds like a testimonial to Abbey and his family, and you should recognize one thing, and I think Channel 12 should have indicated this, that this reporter, Asher, is a neighbor of Abbey. They live in the same subdivision, just down the street from each other. They know each other. They're friends. I think 12 should have pointed that out. You know, this is not a straight story about the conviction of a public official who is convicted of ripping off Burton taxpayers to the tune of at least $325,000. That's what he was convicted of. You know, actually the theft, and I want to just briefly mention this, the theft may have been even greater than the $325,000. Here, let me here's an update. At last night's city council meeting in Burton. Lori Tenen, who's been on this case since she's been active in Burton for the last 8-10 years, in the wanting an investigation of the Smiley administration, is extremely knowledgeable about this Pebble Creek. She's worked on this since it started. She knew the background of it, and she's done a lot of research. But anyway, it says audit sought after conviction. It reads, this is by Joe Lawler, who does a good job covering out there. The City Council of Burton on Monday voted to ask the State Treasurer's Office to conduct an audit of the Pebble Creek subdivision less than 2 weeks after the neighborhood was featured in a public corruption trial that resulted in the conviction of former Public Works Director Charles Abbey. Councilwoman Lori Tenen, a longtime critic of Mayor Charles Smiley's administration, said the audit should examine how $324,000 in, quote, overpaid and or overhead and profit money was funneled from the city to developer Blake Rizzo. Tenen said the auditors should also look at whether the city could retrieve the money from Rizzo and whether the infrastructure work was done properly. Rizzo testified during the trial of Abbey that Abbey helped structure the deal that paid him profit money from the state-issued bonds so he could pay money he owed to other contractors. Rizzo described it as a favor done for him after he had given Abbey a subdivision lot for free or at a greatly reduced price. Abbey told the Journal in 2005 that he had nothing to do with the Pebble Creek. Abbey will be sentenced on June 27th by District Judge Paul Godola. Now, we know that's not true, what he told the Journal. At least he admits bringing Blake Rizzo to the DPW director at that time. I can't recall his name right now, but he went to him and told him that Blake Rizzo was really the true owner of the Pebble Creek development, and the fellow they had listed was just a front for him. Now, Abbey brings him to the DPW guy who agrees with it. Now, how's it going to go on? Becomes part of the conspiracy here. So he knew that. Then you had at least 7 billings by the attorney, city attorney who was doing the work on Pebble Creek for the city and apparently for Rizzo, where he shows Abbey present at those conferences. He was the director. He was the architect of this whole thing. And now they're trying to say he didn't know anything about it. Tenen said she has her doubts about Abbey, especially considering attorney billings that showed Abbey was involved in meetings, as I mentioned to you. But Tenen said that even though the trial showed connections between Abbey and Pebble Creek, there are still many unanswered questions. Nobody has ever admitted responsibility, Tenen said after Monday's council meeting. Nobody has ever owned up to the responsibility of who put this deal together. Rizzo says in his testimony, sworn testimony, that Smiley and LeDuc and Abbey were involved in it. And then it says former city attorney Richard Hamilton authorized a $324,000 payment to Rizzo, city records show. Now, keep in mind, Hamilton represented both Rizzo and the city of Burton. He's billing the city of Burton for dealing with Rizzo, and then he just gives him $324,000 to manage his own development, which is unheard of. Smiley said he doesn't have a problem with the city council asking the state to conduct an audit, but he expressed frustration with Tennant. He says, quote, Lori Tennant will never let anything go, Smiley said. Thank God for that, because none of this would have come out if it wasn't for Lori Tennant. She won't let go. And she's now hopefully saving millions of dollars for the taxpayers of Burton. Because if it wasn't for her, there would be no investigation. She's the most knowledgeable person there is. The FBI comes to her. The U.S. Attorney comes to her to ask questions about this project because she understands it. She studies what's going on in Burton. And then Smiley says, he's right. Lori Tennant never lets anything go. Then he went on to say, all that stuff was way over my head on Pebble Creek. What is he saying? This is the largest bond issue in the history of the city of Burton. He signed it. He signed off on the check of $325,000 to Rizzo. And he says he doesn't know what was going on with this. It's over his head. What is he? Over his head? This has to deal with subdivisions and developments going up in his city. What is he saying there? Well, anyway, the other thing, that's part of the project that still has to go. The project with the investigation of Abby and the ultimate conviction revolves around a lot that Rizzo said he gave Abby as a, free of charge, like a gift, in order to help him with his developments as they went through the process of the bureaucracy of the city of Burton. Abby was DPW director, personnel director, and also the administrator for the mayor while this was going on. He was the guy next to the mayor. Did all these things for the mayor. And the mayor's saying he never talked to me about it, or I didn't know what was going on. Come on. But anyway, Rizzo claims he gave this as a gift. Abby claims, and the defense tried to show, that Abby bought the property and paid Rizzo for it. Now, I want you to see this interview with Smiley by Channel 12, and then we'll come back to it. Can you play that, please?
Of the conspiracy, robbery, and extortion has just resigned as Department of Public Works Director.
That's according to Burton's mayor, who spoke exclusively to ABC 12 today about his friend and co-worker being found guilty. Good evening, I'm Angie Hendershot.
And I'm Bill Harris. After a week-and-a-half-long trial, the prosecution convinced the jurors City Administrator Charles Abbey traded political favors for free land for Burton developer Blake Rizzo. Taryn Asher joins us live with reaction. The story will only see on ABC 12 this Friday. Taryn?
Bill, Burton's mayor Charles Smiley says he still cannot believe Charles Abbey was found guilty, and he knows there's a possibility the government could come after him next.
Mr. Abbey was innocent. I could have cleared up anything that they would have asked. I mean, that proffer is full of lies.
Burton Mayor Charles Abbey is referring to this developer agreement. In it, developer Blake Rizzo, who was facing 4 felonies at the time, claimed he paid off Genesee County officials for public favors. During the trial, the prosecution focused on Rizzo's involvement with Mayor Smiley and Charles Abbey, who a jury found guilty. Advised by the defense, Abbey and Smiley didn't testify.
Abbey wasn't able to get his case on it. Had I been able to testify, maybe I could have cleared up some of the lies that were told, and there were some serious lies.
Smiley says yes, Rizzo gave Abbey a free lot in his subdivision, but he never asked for it or did anything in return.
An arrangement that him and Blake made had no strings attached to the city of Burton, none whatsoever. And Blake committed that in the trial. You know, he said it was a gift.
Well, he says it was a gift, right? He says Rizzo made a gift to him. Now, Abbey couldn't help him with the Pebble Creek. Now let's look at what Abbey says about this lot that he received and how he interprets what happened. Can you play that, please?
I let my community down. They entrusted me to do right.
He served the city of Burton for 26 years. Now, Charles Abbey has resigned his position as the city administrator and director of Public Works Director after he is found guilty of conspiracy, bribery, and extortion. Good evening. I'm Angie Hendershot.
And I'm Bill Harris. For the first time since the jury handed down the guilty verdicts in federal court last week, Charles Abbey is talking, and only to ABC 12. ABC 12's Terry Nasher joining us now live from the newsroom with more on her exclusive interview. Terry?
Abbey says hindsight is 20/20. If he had to do it all over again, from buying a lot from developer Blake Rizzo to not taking the stand in the federal trial against him, Abbey says he would do it all differently.
I almost passed out. I honestly believed from the bottom of my heart that I was going to be acquitted.
Reality has finally set in for Charles Abbey, but he says the regret has been there from the beginning.
I could have used better judgment. I could have probably thought things through a little better, but by no means I know what's going through Mr. Rizzo's mind.
During the trial, Burton developer Blake Rizzo testified he bribed Abbey with this free lot in his Maplewood Meadows subdivision, and both of them covered it up by transferring the lot to Rizzo's assistant. But Abbey says he bought the lot from Rizzo through a quick claim deed and paid nearly $23,000 in liens and assessments.
They painted a broad brush.
Now, which one is it? Smiley says it was a gift. Abbey says he bought it. The jury obviously believed that it was given to him by Rizzo so he could help Rizzo get some of these projects through, and the first one down the road that he ran into was apparently the Pebble Creek one, where he ended up paying him at least $324,000, but maybe as much as $1 million. Because when you project the value attributed to the approximately 100 lots in Pebble Creek and divided into the $4,700,000, there was about $300,000 for other road repairs and other areas of the city in that millage. If you projected that, it's about $31,000 a lot for the infrastructure. And the people are now paying $22,000, which means that the cost of the infrastructure really was about $2,500,000. So there was built in there an extra $1 million in that bond issue to pay back Abbey, or to pay back Rizzo for the debt he owed the contractor and the other contractors involved here. So anyway, it was just, a complete fraud, and they ripped off the taxpayers. Now, Abbey says he bought it. Smiley says it was a gift. These guys couldn't get their